Okay, I'm stepping way out of my comfort zone at the moment because I'm actually just going to talk while I demo. I've been asking my team at my other job to step out of their comfort zone and be doing Zoom chats with our clients and video snippets. So I thought today I would just do it I would video this painting without actually speeding it up like I normally do to make it work on Instagram and Facebook. And realistically I'm just going to do a sky probably and then stop because it's actually 6 o'clock, and most of you wouldn't start painting now, but my feeling is if this makes me do it quickly and without too much concern, then that's a great time just to start, get as much done as I can in that time and leave it be. If I stress too much, put too much pressure on, take too much time, it can really easily become overworked and laboured. So this is a really light wash of yellow ochre. You could use raw sienna, and you can see the brush strokes are really loose, dancing over the paper. I'm not consciously painting clouds, but basically this is the volume of the cloud. I'm going to leave some white at the top, but I'm going to start with a soft yellow. And what I don't want is a hard edge at the top of the yellow. I don't mind if the yellow is stronger at the bottom, but I don't want it to be dark yellow at the top edge of where I put this colour. I'm going to throw in a little bit more of an oranger tone. This is a bit of mental blank. Talking while painting is not the easiest. Cad red light and Indian yellow is what that mix is. And I'm changing this as I go. So over this side now, I've got a pinker mix, and I make all these colours up before I start, so that I don't have to stop and mix, because if I stop to mix, this would all be dry and I wouldn't get a beautiful wet in wet sky, which is what I want to achieve. I want this gorgeous blending of colour that will only happen while it's wet. So I say it all the time in class, and then I still see people start painting their sky without every colour mixed up, watery, that they're going to need. Well, not necessarily watery, but to the right consistency. So at the moment it might look like a bit of a hot mess, but you just live with that and trust in the process of watercolour that it's going to do what you want it to do, or it's going to give you an unexpected result. At the moment this is running because I've got it more upright than I would normally paint, just for the purpose of the video, where I had the camera set up last time up above me or above my painting. There's a lot of shadow. At the moment I've got some lights not working properly in here, thanks to some lovely little critters in my wall. And so I want this cloud to come off the side of my page, so I'm putting a bit of depth over there, right off the edge of the page, so that it looks like the cloud travels across. What I want to avoid is 3 cloud shapes. So I'm putting this mauve mix in the bottom of the cloud. This is a mixture of Alizarin crimson and Ultramarine blue. You can see where it touches the orange, they're complementary colours, so it does a little bit grayer than what it is down here. So you get these lovely changes of tone that are unpredictable. And so where clouds are further back on the horizon, they become flatter. So here I'm just bringing a little bit of longer strokes. I'll bring this off the side. And so now I can bring a bit of sky colour into this top corner, just with cobalt blue. And in this part, I don't want to leave too much white, the grain of the paper. I'm using rough paper. This is Arches. And so that does, with a great brush, give you this lovely broken stroke, which I often really like. But just in the more solid part of the sky, I don't want that. Where it meets the cloud, I do want it though. So I will try not to overpaint that area. And so here I make sure I don't go right down to my colour because I want to leave the white volume of the cloud. I don't want to follow that shape, but I want it to be the darkest tone of blue up near the top, so if it's still wet enough to drop more in, I'll do that. And so my intention was that I would have a little bit of blue in between these clouds. So I've just got to watch that this doesn't look too harsh, I guess. I want to just have a little blue sky peeping through and separating these cloud masses a little bit. Again in here. So this is forming the underneath of this top cloud, but the top edge of the cloud below it, if that makes sense. This white is the top of that cloud. I'm going to follow close to the bottom of the top cloud though. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the lower part of the sky is really lovely to come in with a cerulean blue. There, so that it's a bit lighter and yellower towards the horizon. Cerulean's one of my favourite colours. And this is where I paint a little bit more carefully. If I touch that cloud, you'll see where I do it, it'll almost look like a little rain, little shower of rain coming down out there. Go around my lighthouse. This is a scene of Palm Beach. I'm trying to do some local scenes there for the gallery at Palm Beach, Art Gallery on Palm Beach, which is a gorgeous group of artists. There's about 14 of us involved in that gallery. And sadly we're closed at the moment, but we will be open again soon. Here I've got to watch because you can see, or hopefully you can see, it's really wet. There's a lot of moisture because my board's quite vertical. If I dry my brush a little bit, it's still damp, that's called a thirsty brush, and I can just pick up a little bit of that. I would never dab, I'm not a dabber, because what I find that does is change the moisture content of the paper, and then you'll have a drier section than this part next to it. So I would always rather control the amount of moisture with my brush, just picking it up if it's got too much water, too much moisture, then pressing paper towel to dry it. Because I don't actually want to dry the paper, I just wanted to lift the little bead of water that was gathering. And so in through here I want to get a little bit of blue sky because these were those low flying clouds. I might actually just touch that so that it's soft. Let that run a little bit more. And I can only do that if this is still damp. If that's dry and the sheen's gone and I touch it with the cerulean blue, it's going to run back up and give me a cauliflower or a bloom up there. I feel like this little triangle here needs a little touch of blue sky peeping out, so I've got to be careful not to put too much that it runs down into the cloud, and I did just touch it there. And the reason for that is that this is actually looking fairly dry. This little section here has lost its sheen, so I might end up with a cauliflower there. But what I love about this, when you don't overwork it and don't touch it and don't worry about brush strokes, is you get these beautiful variations in the colour that you can't manufacture yourself. That's just the magic of watercolour and trusting it to do what it does best. I don't love double lines, so an overlap of lines. So what I usually aim to do is just bring that blue a little bit lower. I don't know what I picked up there. A little bit lower into the mountain, or like here into the water. I'll just soften that down with clean water, just to let it run down and not leave me with a hard edge. I'm going to do this now while it's damp, so I don't have to worry about that edge too much, because the purple will pick it up. So I'm working with the same mauve that I put in up here, which is Ultramarine blue and Alizarin crimson. And in a second I'm going to mix up a thicker mix as well. I'll do that now because I'm low on colour. So I want it actually to be a bit stronger than what I've got it. And so I painted this scene the other day, slightly different proportion. I had this headland up a bit higher, less sky and more water. I just wasn't 100% happy with the composition of the water in the end. So you know what? It's a piece of paper. You can't be invested in that. Took me X amount of hours, and the piece of paper cost $17. You know, whatever you pay for your paper, it's all just the exercise, and every painting you do, you get better. So there's nothing lost by repeating a scene and changing it slightly, or doing it again the same, but working on the part of it that you didn't love in the end. So I haven't used any masking fluid. The other day I did put a little bit of masking fluid on the some of the waves, but I'm not going to worry for today. The time was getting away from me, and I just want to start painting. So again, I'm coming in thicker now. I've made up a same colour mix but just stronger, so less water. And on this headland, my photo's gone to sleep. It's good not to be a slave to your reference photo. I had drawn in what I needed. The sky in my photo was plain, so it didn't have any purpose to be looking at the photo. But now I do just want this sense that there is shadow, which happens the way the cliff overhangs there at Barrenjoey Lighthouse. But I'm not holding up close to me to look at the image. I just really want a sense of this headland in the distance. I've got a little lighthouse and building, roof of a building drawn there. This is going to keep softening and running though. I might just flatten it up a little bit. I'm going back into my slightly wetter mix because I forgot. I just want to get this little sense of broken trees up the top here. And so my goal is always get the first wash on. So just keep working down. I didn't pre-mix any watercolours or sand, so that will take me a minute now, and that lets this just set up and dry a little bit. So I'll stop the video, just mix up a bit of sand colour, water, and I can join them back up in a minute. And by that stage, these wetter bits will have just set a little bit, making it easier for me. Okay, I'm back. All I've got mixed up is the sand colour, which is basically a stronger version of this pinky tone up here. I used yellow ochre and rose madder genuine. I've wet a bit of turquoise, so cobalt turquoise. I usually find I like a bit of mauve out at the horizon, and that just helps to give distance. Even though in your photos the horizon will often look like a hard line and very strong dark colour, in a painting you want to get that sense of distance and perspective happening. So I usually start with a lighter mauve colour and then come into my darker tones. So I've mixed up, just as I'm working now, a little bluer and greenier colour, so I added a little bit more Ultramarine blue. And sorry about the scraping, but that's actually a really good sign that you're using your whole arm to paint. If you just move your wrist, take my bracelet off so it's not as noisy. If you paint like this with your wrist, it'll going to end up with RSI. This is a big sheet of paper. I'm working on a full sheet, so actually just using my whole arm to get that brush moving across, and my finger also is underneath, so that's what you can hear dragging even here, because it's just balancing, helping me paint a little bit straighter, a little bit smoother, sorry, stroke. So you can see where the purple touched, that's all fine, that's just like reflection in the water. I'm not trying to leave a white line all the way between, because that will look really artificial. You know, the wave wouldn't necessarily happen that way. So the colour I forgot to mix was a lighter green, so a little bit of turquoise with a little bit of maybe yellow ochre, because where the water is shallow we see the sand through it, so a lighter green helps that give you a sense of shallow water. Even just dropping in the actual sand colour will work. Now this is reflection of that, so a wet patch of sand here which is reflecting the mauve that's in the hill. So I'm going to put that in, but I'm going to leave a little bit of white there as if that's the froth of water around the edge of it. I want kind of a smooth. And so here I've got to watch that doesn't dry if I want to touch back to it. But if I'm not worried about touching back, it doesn't matter. So if it has dried, then we would just see that as a wave. So that's quite a smooth edge. So that's the top of the wave as it rolls towards us. The underneath though wouldn't be so smooth because the wave might be breaking. So we don't want it to be perfect. But the way I see it, you don't get too many attempts with water. You don't want to come back in and labour and layer because it becomes really flat. Actually, I'm just going to catch that. So I want to get it close to the right depth in this first stage, and then I might just add a few strokes after it's dry to deepen areas or to add movement. So I like this little sparkle that happens. I felt like in my other painting I left too much white, so I'm going to leave less sense of waves through this one. And I changed colour a lot. I went into from green to mauve to light blue. So if you want to keep that, you just make sure you don't overwork it. But to get it in the first place, oh, that's a bit of a problem. To get it in the first place, that's the only time I do dab. Just to qualify that, I needed to get that off quickly. If you want that broken line, the quicker that you pull your brush across, the better you get that effect of a dry brush stroke. Now coming in here, I am going to get shallow light in the water, so I'm going to go to a lighter colour. I'm going to add some more yellow into my green. Oops, and I've just flicked it again. I don't know what I'm doing with that. I don't know why I'm throwing it around. So I'm coming lighter. Hopefully you can see that. I'll move the paper up. You can see I don't stretch. I don't tape it down. And I find the less I do of that, the less the paper actually buckles. But there's whole different schools of thought around stretching and taping paper. Usually at most I'll throw a few bulldog clips. Now I'm going to come in here with a mauve, as if that is a reflection on very, very, very shallow water. So this is my sky and my mountain headland reflecting. And so I want all of this to meet up wet in wet, so I do have to work quickly. I looked at my watch before and that whole period from here to here was about 15 minutes. So if you think, oh, I need an hour or 2 hours to paint, you absolutely don't. This first wash will actually be 90% of the painting done, and it will probably take less than half an hour usually. And so now this is my sand. So generally the sand is lighter where it's drier away from the wet sand. It gets darker closer to the wet sand, and then it has reflection. I've got a dirty finger. Then it has reflection here. So again, we're reflecting the sky, but I'm going to go into a lovely cerulean. I do want to leave a little white skim here. Not perfect all the way along. If it touches like here, that's fine. I didn't actually mean for that to be as dark, so if that's the case, it doesn't affect the rest of your painting. To tilt it up is a good way just to travel that colour back a little bit. And so what's the most important is that while this edge is wet, I come right next to it with my sand colour. So that I get this lovely transition. This part's already dry. Oh, sorry, that part's not dry. This part's pretty close to dry up here, so I want to be really careful. Just leave a little skim that's going to be just a shimmer of white. Can be froth or reflection. I'm losing brush hairs, but that's really normal. I don't normally worry too much about them because they do just pop off at the end. So out here I don't want the colour as dark. I want that lighter sand. This is actually a bit of greenery here, so I want a little bit of sand colour in there. And to bring our eye in, I do want to keep the dark sand colour down the bottom here. So now I've just got clean water on my brush and really just joining that up. And you can see I'm using the brush in all different directions. I'm not trying to paint it smoothly. Like I want this change of direction and interest that gives the sand, because the sand's not perfectly smooth unless you're the only person on the beach at Whitehaven. And so as that's just starting to dry, I'm running out of colour, so I've just got a mix, but as it's starting to just dry a little bit, I want to flick some spotty bits of colour in. So I'm just mixing that colour up a little bit thicker, and you can see it's actually, you know, a little bit by accident, a little bit pinker. So I might just, I've got to watch though, if I start tampering there, I'm going to lose this lovely transition. But I do want this to be a bit rough in its texture. So I'm not worried about where that's travelled down, where the blue travels into my sand colour. I'm not worried about that either. All of these things at the end sometimes become your favourite parts of the painting. This transition through where the greens run into the purple gives us a really interesting look as that dries. And this will actually get a second layer probably of colour down here. But a couple more flicks, and I might actually, so when I'm flicking, I'm using the brush and I'm hitting it there just above where I want them to land, so that I hopefully avoid it going right over into my water or up into the sky. I'm going to also flick some of the mauve. That was probably bluer than I intended. And up here we've got some greenery where there's like a little sand dune with some grass growing, and up into the headland there's a bit of grass. And you could wait for this to dry, but there's not really a reason that you have to. Depends on whether you want hard edges or soft. And again, instead of dabbing this, because I don't really want that to travel into my sand, but I'll try and control that a little bit with the brush and just push it back up. These little bits of white are fine, that'll look like sand. Even using your nail, sometimes we'll just push that back. Just gotta watch you don't get hard lines. Which is what I got. I should have used my finger, not my nail. Just putting a little bit darker. So this was indigo and yellow, cad yellow for a quick green. Now I do need to just catch that dark line now. I don't like how that went there. But what I do like is that it's bluer and then yellower. From each time I mix, it's slightly different. I'm not aiming for this perfect same colour green. Okay, so that's the first layer on the painting, half an hour, and it's done. And so I'll let that dry, and I won't get back to this now probably until the weekend. I think I'm going to have a little ship out there. All of the cruise ships are off our coast at the moment, so I might put the Ruby Princess out on the horizon because of my little green fleck. But hopefully I'll see you again at the weekend. And it would be great to see if you paint a big sky loose and free like this. Please feel free to share. So my first port of call after completing the first wash on a painting is to stand back and have a look. So I've got an easel set up at the end of my studio, and I often will just sit back here in my little chair, the only chair I've got in the studio. I'll have a little snack, or today a beer, and just have a think about what jumps out at me that needs changing. Obviously there's still more work to do on it, but standing back makes a big difference. If you stay right on top of your paintings the whole time, you're not getting an accurate vision of what it's going to look like framed on the wall. So this is the time where I just look. My aim is to not do too much. If I can avoid touching back into the sky, that's what I want to do. I need some, sorry it's very wobbly, I need some finishing touches in the water and down in the foreground. I had intentionally kept this free of people, and I'll decide towards the end whether I need to put some people in, or birds or anything like that. But okay, so I'm back to this one. I've looked from a distance, worked out roughly where I want to go. My little lighthouse is obviously fairly important. So this is a scene from Palm Beach of Barrenjoey Lighthouse, Barrenjoey Headland. There's some buildings here with little red roofs. I guess the lighthouse keeper. I better take my earrings out because they jangle. they jangle. Sorry, you're probably going to hear that clicking. So light red's really good for roofs and things. Just a suggestion, I'm not worried about forming all of the buildings. I feel like the lighthouse is, it is just white at the top. There's no red or anything on it, unfortunately. That would have made for a little bit more interesting painting. This part I'm going to just leave the headland for the moment, and if at the end I feel like it needs something, then I'll add it then. I'm going to add a few strokes of colour through the water, not very much, and a little bit of white gouache to form some waves and foam. I wouldn't ever want to paint a large amount of white gouache and get a big area like this back. I just want to add some broken edges to suggest the froth, and maybe a little bit of splatter here and there. So it needs to be thick. If you add much water to this, it just soaks in and looks I don't know what the word is. It looks dull if I put it on watery. What I would rather is a broken dry brush looking stroke to give the suggestion of this froth. So I often just will use it straight out of the tube. If I want to mix it with another colour and make a bluer white for in the shade, or a warmer white where it's really sunlit, I'll put it on a little palette and mix it with Cerulean or Indian yellow. So I think of these as Z shapes, so if you think that's a Z, if you do strokes like this, it gets really choppy looking. These flatter sort of joining up Zs work really well for froth. So hopefully you're all getting lots of painting time with the self-isolation that's happening. Lots of time to create. Oh, I wanted to add some darker tones in there, so I'll make sure I don't bring white in there. Here, where it touches the rocks, we can just have a little bit so it looks like it's hitting the rock and splashing up, as water does. So this is a reflection of the mountain on, or the headland just on damp sand. So I'll go back into my watercolours and just mix up a variety of bluey greens, just to get some variation in through here, so maybe a little bit darker. And I've got to watch that I don't overdo it. I don't want to fully paint over this water that I've already created, because I've done that once or twice in my lifetime and ruined the paintings. They just look overworked. The less you do on it, the fresher it is. So these are like calligraphy kind of marks where again your brush is dancing around. It's not straight, it's not perfect, it's broken, dry brushed in areas and more solid and velvety in other parts. But normally I get sort of lighter as it goes further back. Soften them out a little bit. And underneath a wave like this, so this is my white, if you can imagine, as a wave crashing towards us. That's usually darker just up in underneath. So even in those curved areas, if you photograph and study some waves, the other thing that often happens is you see sand in that. So you can also put yellower touches in there, which will give that impression that the sand's being churned up in the shallow water. And so I wouldn't do all of these strokes in the same colour or the same depth of colour. I've gone a bit lighter now as I come forward. And I'm not going to do much in here at all, because I want to keep that looking just like the shallow water, seeing the sand through. I'm going to just darken a little bit on that side of my reflection. I feel like this is a little bit flat, so I'm going to just flick a little bit. But because I don't want to flick dark colour into my water, sometimes it goes where you don't want it. So the paper towel will just save that section, and I'm going to dampen just with a spritz, because I don't want these to have hard edge, which is what they're getting now. I usually wear a bit of this on my face. So rather than press that with a paper towel, just flicking water now or using the spritzer again breaks that up. And also flicking back in with the same sand colour will break it up as well. Clear water again. And I'm conscious there's like a patch of it, it doesn't come down here, so I want to make sure it's darker down near the bottom with the bottom edge to bring your eye up. And if I've done that and then I do think, well, it's a bit stark and crazy compared to my sand up here, I don't want to press it and take it all off. I just want to catch a little bit of it, so, and make it less busy. So I'm just going to soften it just a little bit. And again, I can spritz just to get it moving a little bit and be less looking like I just flicked paint with the brush. Soften it down. And remember, it does always dry lighter. Watercolour. And because I had that paper towel there, I've got nothing happening here. My green's probably a little bit soft. A little bit soft edged here, so I'm just going to, I didn't mean to have that chunk of indigo on my brush. A bit of dry brush stroking through there to give that a bit of interest. And also to catch this dark line that I accidentally made with my fingernail, if you remember in the first wash. And while I don't want necessarily big figures, distinguishable figures, I do want something back about here just to suggest that there's, you know, not this pure, clean sand. So it's just dots and dashes, there's nothing There's nothing that's distinct, but it just helps your eye to travel through the painting. And sometimes then even a shadow will help. So I don't have a shadow in my photo, but just bringing something out from there a little bit. Purple and green near each other are really lovely. And the other place that's really good for a shadow is underneath this white froth. So it's three-dimensional. And the shadow falling in there helps that to look like it's that little bit of foam that actually rolls back and is a little bit larger right at the edge of the waterline. And I'm just softening one side of it so that it helps to form the edge of the froth with the harder edge up against it. So some of these as well could have a little bit. And this is just the same mauve I've been using all the time of Ultramarine and Alizarin. This is maybe too bouncy, so I'm just going to straighten that up a little bit. And then at this time I would look again from a distance. Oh, the other thing though, sorry, before I do that, is white foam is never pure white. So adding a little bit of mauve into that, bit of shadowing, just helps again for that to look three-dimensional. And it's broken, so you need to not make it mauve, like that froth is moving and heaving. So it's just the side of the brush dragging along in places, and not the whole thing, just in parts. To make that look less perfectly white. And like we were talking about before, up here, a little bit of sand churns up in there as well, so you can drop a little bit of yellow. And drop a little bit of yellow in underneath some of these as well if you want to. So hopefully some of you tackled a beach scene during the week, or a big sky. If I gave you inspiration to do either, I'm happy. And I'll stand back and look at this. So there's a couple of spots where like there's a splattered or dripped something. If that really worries you, you can make them into birds. But truly it doesn't worry me at all. I think as long as your eye is drawn somewhere else, and that doesn't become, you know, a focus or a center of interest, then I don't worry about it. If it really bothers me, I can take a scalpel to it and just shave it off the top of the paper, or I can make it a bird just by putting a little suggestion of wings. And I just want to get that bright white on the side of that top of the lighthouse.